Well, it was a privilege to be asked to be in the book. It's an enormous compilation of components about public relations, and there was nothing in there planned on state and local government relations, and I was asked to do it, so I said, oh yeah, I'll put my thoughts together, and it was a good exercise for me. I put it together something like a lecture before a class on state government relations, and it wasn't meant so much as a recruitment tool for students, more a how to do it, things to think about, guiding thoughts on how to become effective or stay effective in the field. And it's something that's somewhat under the radar in terms of people generally want to, students generally, if they want to go into government relations, generally want to go to Washington, D.C. And there's so much going on at the state level that I think it sometimes gets short shrift and isn't really identified as a particular career area or study area. So that's why I did it, and I drew on almost 30 years of experience in the field, and both in state government relations and also federal stuff, which I did prior to that. Well, I think hopefully they'll read it, and something in there will grab their attention, say, oh, that might be interesting, something to do as a career or some way to, learn my trade and get things done. I started working for the Legislative Council of the General Assembly of the state of Colorado when I was a student in Denver, and started working on laws regarding Jeeps and snowmobiles in high mountain areas, and found it fascinating. And I did research, and I did coalition work with owners groups and the environmental groups, et cetera. So I found that very interesting. Prior to my getting involved in government relations, and I always went back to that. I've worked in Washington, D.C. for the National Association of Manufacturers. I've done environmental work with moderate groups over the years. I've worked for corporations both in Washington and out at the state level, and have invariably found that the state activity was a lot more interesting and frankly fun. And Washington moves at a sort of a snail's pace. They've been talking about health care reform since the Nixon administration in Washington, and Obama finally got it done, but people year after year had the same conversations. At the state level, things can come up in one house, say the Senate, and get passed one day, and 2 days later it can pass the House, and by Friday it can be on the governor's desk and signed. So things move very quickly, and consensus is relatively easy to reach at the state level. A lot of stuff doesn't go anywhere, but things can move very quickly as well. So that makes it very interesting. And I've never been based in a state capital. I've always worked through contract lobbyists of one sort or another, and through coalitions of industry types. And so it's for me, it was a lot more interesting and attention grabbing over the long haul. I think that there will be more and more attention paid to public policy at the state level and also the local level, county level, metropolitan level, et cetera. So I think there's going to be no shortage of jobs. It's a matter of how to get into it on the front end. I think everything is sped up now incredibly. You can look at, there are websites for laws and regulations for every state, and you can go online and see bills that that have been introduced that day or the day before. It used to be you'd have to call or write the legislative bill office, and it would take you a week to get a copy of legislation. It doesn't work that way anymore. But so everything has been sped up. Media, you can get websites for every state capital. You can get their radio station on your computer, and you can listen to the morning news about what's going on. Every state government has state and local government has a website practically. So it's able to, you're able to get information a lot quicker. What you can't do is actually be there and eyeball people and talk about what this legislation means to the state and to the various stakeholder groups, et cetera. You really have to be there or have somebody who's really good on the ground who can do that for you. So the media thing has changed 1,000% since I started doing this some I don't know, 25, 30 years ago.
Okay. Why would you tell a student now to go into why would you, I know it's not meant to be a recruiting tool or whatever, but why would you encourage someone to go into your part of public relations?
Well, it's A, it's interesting. B, I think it's a target-rich environment to get employment. There are the state government itself to work for the General Assembly or for the administration of the governor, but also there's a huge explosion of trade groups and interest groups that it used to be there'd be one guy for the agriculture community, and there would be one guy for the gun lobby, and there'd be one guy for the pharmaceutical industry. Now there are offices in state capitals with multiple people. Every state has a huge presence of interest groups, and they're lobbying. They're lobbyists. So I just think that there's a lot of different ways you can get into it, and there are also companies and trade associations that have interests in every state, and the interests are fairly narrow, but they're quite broad. For instance, soft drinks. Everybody's always trying to raise the excise tax on soft drinks, cigarettes. It's not a big issue, but it's a big issue for the companies that make those things. The beer industry. I was in the solid waste industry for a long time. Every state tries to deal with its garbage management issues, so there's that. So if you look at if somebody were looking for a job these days, it might do to look at the registered lobbyist lists and see who's doing what in the state capitol for whom, and just start talking to those folks and asking them, for either an internship, which doesn't pay very well, but it's a leg up and a foot in the door, or looking for a full-time job on these things. And you can do the same thing online with corporations and trade association groups. Trade associations are the third biggest industry in Washington, D.C. after publishing and government, and it's a good place to go and get. There are a lot of state government relations jobs in Washington, D.C. The field is, it's not a cookbook. You can't tell people, say, do this, then this, then this, then this. It's kind of like going down rapids in a canoe. You can you get in the canoe and you start paddling, and a lot of it is improvisation and simply getting to the calm water again. So The only way you can really learn how to do these things is to get in there, get your feet wet, get the job, or get the position within the organization you want to work for, and just start doing it. Use common sense, and we only get things done through other people. So one of the keys, I think, to advocacy, either at the federal level or state level or local level, is knowing a lot of people and getting getting people who you can count on for mentorship or advice or information. And it's just a good idea to, every meeting you're in, try to get, carry a lot of business cards, and make sure you try to get 3 or 4 business cards from other people, and organize them geographically and organize them alphabetically, and just keep track of who you've met and what their particular expertise or interest or sphere of influence is. So there's a long answer to a short question, but I believe that's the way you get going. Know a lot of people, ask everyone to be your friend, and know your subject matter, and then just do it. And a lot of it's by the seat of your pants when you start, or even when you've done it for a long time. But that's the way it is. It's not a particularly tidy process to deal in. And what did the person say? There are 2 things you don't want to see made: sausage and legislation. So that's what you have to do. Keeping public policy is not something that's going to be done in one particular spot in Washington or in Lincoln, Nebraska, or California, or Springfield. It's being looked at by multiple people all the time. It's important to have a 30,000-foot view of these things, and be able to deal with them in a systematic way that will help the organization you're working for. Don't get too focused. I always try to keep a higher perspective on things.